Hello and welcome. My name is Brian Parker and I am Ipaf's Head of Safety and Technical. And it is my pleasure today to be your host for today's webinar. Today we'll be discussing preventing Mewp mechanicals and technical failures. Now in 2022, the Ipaf Global Safety Report highlighted Mewp mechanical technical failures, and they were featured as one of the top 7 fatal incident trends. Now, was this a blip, or perhaps was it a result of furlough during the pandemic, or was it due to just having less technicians and engineers around in businesses around the world? Well, today we are going to explore and certainly discuss this. And with that in mind, we have 4 great speakers lined up for you today. First, we'll kick off with Mike Ashton, who is Ipaf's International Safety and Technical Advisor. Then we will follow on with, from a manufacturer's perspective, Jim Waldron, who is Director of Product Safety of Skyjack and Chair of the Ipaf Manufacturers Technical Committee. Then let's look at it from a rental perspective. So I'm really pleased to say that we've got Rob Cavaleri, who is the Safety and Compliance Manager for Manlift Middle East, joining us. Rob is also a member of the Ipaf International Safety Committee. And finally, let's look at it from the sharp end, from the contractor's perspective. So we've got Caroline Haslam, who is the head of QHSE at FK Group in the UK. Now we've got over 500 people registered today from 48 countries, which is fantastic. And really big thank you for joining us here today. So certainly good morning, good afternoon and good evening to you all, because this is truly a global webinar. I would also like to say a huge thank you to our sponsors of this webinar, and that is today Hinowa and GemOne. Certainly without our sponsor support, we wouldn't be able to run these webinars. Okay, so just a little bit of housekeeping before we move on. The webinar is being conducted live, so we are live, and we're having simultaneously translated into Italian, Spanish, German, French, Portuguese, Dutch, Chinese, and Korean, I believe. And this webinar is also recorded, so it'll be on the Ipaf website and the Ipaf YouTube channel in the next few days, so do look out for that. Also, it's a real great opportunity to go on there and look at past webinars that Ipaf have carried out. Now, following the presentations today from our speakers, we'll be having a panel session, and this is really your opportunity to put live questions to the panel. So please do use the Q&A function. And we will endeavour to answer all these questions, but we will be monitoring the questions as we go through. So now, just before we move on to the first presentation, we're going to watch a short film from Hinowa. Okay, thank you to Hinowa. Great insight into some of their products there. Fantastic. Okay, without much further ado, I'm now going to hand you over to Mike Ashton. Mike, over to you.
Share the screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it, Mike.
Okay, hello and thank you for joining us. My name is Mike Ashton and I'm Ipaf's International Safety and Technical Advisor based in Queensland, Australia. The Global Safety Report 2022 contained information which showed there was an upwards trend in the number of incidents involving mechanical and technical failures in the 3-year reporting period, 2019 to 2021. In this component of the webinar, we'll be examining the data we received from the accident portal and discussing possible reasons for mechanical and technical failures occurring on Mewps. We'll also discuss preventative measures to reduce the likelihood of failures occurring. The 10-year reporting period, this is from January the 1st, 2012 until December the 31st, 2021, there have been 332 reports from 17 countries involving mechanical and technical failures on Mewps. There were 346 people involved and 39 fatalities. Construction accounted for 50.8% of reports, followed by rental activity and arboriculture. The UK reported the most mechanical and technical failures overall, with nearly 75% of all reports originating from there. The US and the UAE were second and third place respectively. Accident reporting is mandated in the UK and the UAE. There have been 2 spikes in mechanical and technical failures in this period. The first one was in 2015 to 2016, and the second one was in 2019 to 2021. This slide provides us with information on the period 2019 to 2021. So this is the 3-year reporting period. The number of fatalities in this period has risen significantly. There were 23 fatalities, which is up 91.7%. Construction has nearly 60% of the reports, followed by rental activity and arboriculture. Nearly 60% of incidents occurred in the UK, followed by the US and the UAE. The most common type of Mewp for incidents to occur on in this reporting period was 3B, mobile boom, with nearly 30%, followed by 3A, mobile vertical, with 26.2%, and then 1B, static boom vehicle type. So 57% of incidents occurred in construction, nearly 20% of incidents occurred in rental activity, nearly 9% of incidents occurred in arboriculture, and 7.4 incidents occurred in facilities management. This slide provides information on a 1-year reporting period. So this is 2021. And the standout information here is that fatalities were down just over 30% on the previous year. This is our most up-to-date slide showing information from the 1st of January to November the 30th, 2022. So far, we've received 52 reports from 11 countries, 77 people involved, and 2 fatalities. So fatalities are down 77.8% compared to last year. Okay, so possible causes of mechanical and technical failures on Mewps. So we need to prevent or minimize the likelihood of mechanical and technical failures occurring. So how can we do this? So next up, we'll be focusing on why and how failures occur. We'll be covering the following items. So number 1, failure to perform pre-use checks by Mewp operators. Number 2, failure to follow manufacturers' inspection and maintenance programs by owners of equipment. Number 3, complacency or behavioral-based violations. Number 4, impact or collision with other plant or objects. Number 5, unforeseeable failures. And finally, number 6, operating a Mewp outside of its capability. So first up is number 1, and this is failure to perform pre-use checks by a Mewp operator. So pre-use checks must be carried out prior to use. The purpose of a pre-use inspection is to identify faults with operating systems, damage to equipment, and anything that could foreseeably go wrong. Pre-use checks must be recorded in the operator's logbook. If there are any faults identified on a pre-use inspection, the Mewp must not be used and the fault must be reported. Number 2, Failure to follow manufacturers' inspection and maintenance programs by owners of equipment. So Mewp manufacturers specify the periodical inspection periods and maintenance programs. To ensure the safe use and reliability of your equipment, these instructions must be followed. Examples of inspections could be 3-monthly, 6-monthly, or annual inspections by a competent person, as well as scheduled maintenance when a machine is at a certain age or has recorded a certain number of hours. Number 3, complacency or behavioral-based violations. So complacency is not laziness, it's an overconfidence that makes us unaware of potential dangers or threats, basically taking things for granted that nothing will go wrong. This is not the attitude to have when it comes to the safe operation of Mewps. Malfunctions do happen, damage can occur, and a damaged Mewp increases the likelihood of incidents occurring. Violations are different to complacency. A violation is a deliberate deviation from rule or procedure. For example, if an operator failed on purpose to carry out their pre-use checks, that's a violation. We are seeing an increase in behavioral-based safety infractions from our reports received in the accident portal. Number 4, impact or collision with other plant or objects. If a Mewp has been impacted, it needs to be checked by a competent person for damage. Impacts can affect the safe operation of a Mewp. Impacts can also affect hydraulics and electrical operating systems. Number 5, unforeseeable failures. Things can go wrong. We know this, but if we do all we can by carrying out inspections and checks, we can minimize the likelihood of mechanical and technical failures occurring. If things do go wrong, you should always isolate, tag, and report. Finally, number 6, operating a Mewp outside of its capability. All Mewps are designed and tested to take the specified capacity limits while maintaining appropriate safety factors. If a Mewp occupant places more load onto the platform and tries to raise it or puts more than the rated load on the platform while at height, there is a risk that this structure will be put under forces it was not designed or tested for. Structural failure in this condition can be sudden and unpredictable and could could result in collapse or overturn. Most Mewps in the marketplace today have safety systems that monitor overload status and protects the operator from exceeding specified capacity limits. However, Mewps built to previous standards may not have these systems installed. Operators must not exceed the stated safe working load and must always stay inside the Mewp operational envelope. Thank you, and now back to Brian Park.
Great, thank you very much, Mike, and great insight into some of the sort of technical failures I know that we've received into the portal, great news that it's that the fatalities has reduced, and let's hope that continues. Okay, now I'm going to hand over to Jim Waldron, who will take you through his session. Jim, over to you, mate.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Brian, can you see the slide?
I can, Jim. Yep, good.
Wonderful, thank you. Right, so as Brian introduced, my name is Jim Waldron. I'm the Director for Product Safety for Skyjack, who are a manufacturer of Mewps and telehandlers, and we distribute globally to all regions of the globe. I'm also the chairman of the Ipaf Manufacturers Technical Committee, where we get together as a collective group of manufacturers and discuss topics close to Ipaf's heart. But on top of that, I'm also a member of a number of committees and working groups that review, develop, and evolve the standards associated with the industry. That's at an ISO level, at an international level, a European level, and at a UK level at the BSI standard level. So what am I looking to go through today? Just want to cover a couple of quick topics within my little window, reinforcing some of the messaging that Mike has already put onto the table. But how is a Mewp governed from design and delivery into use? What layers of defence exist for mechanical and technical issues, and where do manufacturers currently have a part to play in that? And then what are we doing as manufacturers to address technical and mechanical issues through the life of our product? And then just recap on one of the best forms of protection from our perspective. So, as I touched on before, I'm a member of a number of working groups to develop design standards and test standards. And Mewps were created to make the workplace safer. And the objective of a Mewp is to make sure that the workplace is safer than it was before the use of machines. And there's been a natural evolution away from more simpler technologies to get people to work at height where there are hazards, such as using ladders and static scaffolding, but there are times when they're perhaps not the best fit. So the evolution of Mewps was born, but with the ability to move an elevated work platform, additional complexity was introduced and additional hazards were created. And standards were developed across the globe, at an international level and in majority of regions, to address some of those hazards and ensure that they're appropriately mitigated through the design phase. So manufacturers, when they put a product onto the marketplace, ensure that the machines meet the design and test criteria of the standards or the regulations that are in place in the region that we place that product onto the marketplace, which involves stability, strength, structural abilities, safety systems, and performance levels. But equally, the standards also drive a requirement to ensure the information is provided with the machine. So that is from initial use, standard use, pre-use inspections, through to servicing and maintenance of a machine. That information is provided alongside the machine or available and accessible when a machine is put onto the marketplace. And then after sale, the product goes into service, and then it goes through life where the ownership, where the responsibility transitions to the owner. And this is where the potential for technical and mechanical risks are evident. And there are additional standards and guidance material and safe good practices for safe use in various marketplaces as well that address some of the topics that Mike touched on before. So what are the layers of defense? Well, the first layer of defense is the Mewp design itself. So they're designed to standards and regulations to ensure that they meet the right level of stability and consistent design objectives and requirements across the board. So when you buy a Mewp from any manufacturer, if they're putting it on that marketplace, you know they have the same baseline for standardization. Then you have correct use of the machine, which as a manufacturer we support with familiarization materials. These could be part of the operating manual, they could be quick use guides, they could be QR codes, they could be videos, animations, any number of bits of literature to make it as easy as possible for the correct use. So this is ensuring that people maintain the right loads on the platform, that they use it in the right conditions, that they don't take the machine out of the appropriate use, and they don't use them incorrectly. And Mike showed some really good images of how people could step away from that by not using it correctly. Then there's the pre-use inspections that go alongside safe use, and that's typically provided in the operating manuals and a checklist that ensures that before you use a machine on any shift, you've gone through and you're convinced that you yourself are comfortable getting on that machine, or you would let your family member get onto that machine and take it to full height and operate it in accordance with the correct use. So the pre-use inspections are supported by clear and easy to follow operating manuals. Then there's the preventative maintenance on a periodic cycle, where service manuals or the service information provided by manufacturers helps you avoid some of the technical and mechanical issues that can be born as a result of not following the preventative maintenance. So an engine seizing, for example, is a good example when oils haven't been correctly maintained or lubricants haven't been correctly applied. And then you have the thorough inspection, the maintenance and the repair, that if you do find issues or there are items that are picked up during the pre-use inspection and the periodic inspections where you need to maintain it, you need to follow the service manuals again. But again, as manufacturers, there's quite often service training and support from service teams to help with that. So if there are things that need to be replaced or repaired, then the manufacturer will have a service team that will support that and work through that process. So from a manufacturer's perspective, we support all layers of defense, and where required, we lean in and provide the information. But above that, what else we do? So as I mentioned before, we design to standards. So there's a common understanding of the standards that every machine on the market meets. And these standards didn't get created out of nothing. They got created by a group of experts that spend a lot of time working through these standards to ensure that they cover the appropriate essential health and safety risks and hazards that are that exist as a result of working from a Mewp. And they get continually evolved, but they are not just manufacturers in these design committees. They are users, operators, rental companies, experts, authorities, and they all work together to try and create the best standards possible for the region and for the expected use of the region. And you'll have seen perhaps over the last few years a general alignment towards different standards where perhaps a safe practice from one standard gets adopted in another because it's more helpful to be common across the globe. So there is a natural migration of design standards across the globe to come together into something a bit closer. But there will always be local idiosyncrasies or local interpretations of hazards that are subtly different, and that drives subtle differences in local regional design standards. We then provide the information that I mentioned. So that is safe use, that is operating, that is safe maintenance and safe servicing. And then we observe the in-service performance. So we look for any in-service trends from warranty or from service calls, from parts ordering, and we look at that in-service performance to see if there's anything that could be optimized, whether that's providing clarification and support to customers directly on a one-to-one basis, or if there is a trend, how do we help every customer with that learning. And on the back of that, we may update information that we've already published, whether that's an update to the manuals, or in the extreme cases, if there is a genuine scene concern, then there may be a safety bulletin or safety alert published as a result of some of that in-service information based on trending. And we may provide that new information, so we may create newer literature to make it easier for operators. So I know from a Skyjack perspective, we worked hard to introduce new quick start guides, easy access to information through QR codes over our recent updates. And we're always looking at ways to make the information A, more accessible, and B, easier to follow. And then when the opportunity to reopen a design or to look at a new design, we take that in-service experience into the future designs and make sure that future designs are either resilient to some of that in-service experience and feedback, or we design them out if it's sensible and pragmatic to do it. If we think it's something systemic, then we feed it back into updating the standards within the industry. And that's where my position in some of the standards working groups is very useful. And the link with the Ipaf MTC means that I can represent more than perhaps just myself, but I can collect the industry views from the MTC and share them into the update with industry standards that continually evolve. And then we go around the cycle again and we continue that plan, do, check, act cycle across the life of the design. So that's all saying what we've provided into supporting and reducing technical and mechanical issues. But what are the best forms of protection? We feel that there are two main aspects to that. The first one is through general use. The most important aspect is familiarization on the machine that you're operating on. Through training, you can't get access to every machine. You get access to a type of machine and you would understand how to operate the type. But familiarization is critical for knowing how the safety systems operate, how the machine operates, what the operating limitations are for that particular machine. So with the familiarization, you get to know your product a bit more. So you get to know what checks you're intending to do. So your daily checks become more aware and more thorough. And you start to be able to pick up things in advance of them being picked up in service, whether that's leading indicators to mechanical failure or technical issues as a result of something that's happened through your shift. And the big one that I think Mike mentioned as well, if you're not happy, you flag it as a user. It's really important that if you are ever uncomfortable with the machine, standard or quality, then it needs to be flagged, it needs to be tagged, locked and isolated and reported so that it can be put right. And I think the mantra of saying, am I happy taking my family up into the Mewp that I'm on as well, it should be the mantra when you do daily checks. And then on top of that, through use, managing the work site to remove any additional external hazards that can introduce mechanical issues, such as impact from external products or machinery or other items of the work site, or unsafe ground, for example. Really important and critical that the work site is effectively managed so that you don't ever get into the hazardous situations in the first place, where perhaps things can be hit and there can be a mechanical consequence to that impact. And then finally, from a service perspective, it's really important to pay diligence to the instructions that manufacturers have provided, so that when you say you've done a task, that you've done a task in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. That's the best way to ensure that you've done every step in the task that needed to be accomplished. And if the information isn't clear, then that needs to be closed. The loop needs to be closed with manufacturers to ensure the information is comprehensive and is up to date. When you're doing that, following the instructions, it's really important that the service technicians who service the Mewps are competent to do so. So they may be competent with a spanner, but are they competent on the machine that they're about to either take apart or swap a potentially structurally significant part out of? And do they understand the consequence of doing it? And do they understand the consequence of modification and inadvertent modification, such as picking the wrong grade bolt or picking the wrong length fastener, for example? It's really important to understand the machine that's being serviced. And then the final one from the service perspective is that traceability of work performed. So if you do work, you've got an audit history of it, so you're comfortable with the activities that have been performed on that machine, not just on the last inspection, but the inspection before and the inspection before that. So you can have a good traceability of the thoroughness of the servicing on that machine. And the summary I think I would come up with is there is no substitute for proper use and maintenance. If it's used properly, if it's maintained properly, then you will see a reduction in mechanical and technical issues in the Ipaf portal. And I think that's the main message that I think I'd like to get across. And I think Mike was emphasising that as well with his key points, which I fully support. So remain vigilant, remain diligent will be the key message for me. And thank you very much, Brian. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Jim. Much appreciated. Okay, so now we're going to move over to Rob. But before I do that, don't forget you can ask questions and to the panel. So use the function down at the bottom to ask your questions. Thank you. Over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Brian. So I'm the Regional Safety Training and Compliance Manager for Manlift, and my focus is from a rental company's perspective, how can we reduce and eliminate technical failures? So what can cause technical and mechanical failures? In this slide, you can see the pie chart here, which is based on approximately 1,000 Mewps with an average age of 6 years and average utilisation of 70%. And the technical failures that we see in the year, you can see here 8% related to warranty claims back to the manufacturers, approximately 20%, which we notify customers and operators of misuse and damage, which are causing technical failures on the Mewps. And the balance, 72%, is related to other, and that includes the breakdowns that can be related to hydraulic hose fittings and leak issues, related to training needs for mechanics and technicians, unforeseeable failures, tyre issues, component failures and malfunctions, unauthorised modifications, and they can be related to transport-related issues as well. And also to remind ourselves here to understand where technical failures originate from, what is a Mewp? So a Mewp's predominantly a mechanical device that provides safe and efficient method of working at height. And Mewps have in their operating systems and construction, electrical, hydraulic and mechanical features and components. So we need to remember that. Next slide, please. This slide and the next slide, just to give a few examples of potentially hundreds that I could show on some issues that are seen as technical failures. So picture number one, you can see here an inverted jib from a boom, and that's a result of a hydraulic failure. A hydraulic holding valve or counterbalance valve gave way, and which has resulted in this particular failure. Picture number 2 is where some slew ring gear bolts have been incorrectly torqued, and the slew ring is separating from the chassis. And picture number 3 is where we have a structural failure in a chassis, and it's mechanically induced structural failure. And picture number 4, A, B, and C, this relates to, again, incorrectly torqued bolts on a pulley wheel, and the pulley is given way, and that's resulted in internal electrical and mechanical failures within the boom. It's important to remember here that significant outcomes from technical and mechanical failures from the factory are not common. However, we cannot exclude these for improvement needs. Another comment to make here is that Mewps built to an unrecognised standard are considerably more prone to multiple failure types. Next slide, please. So again, a couple more examples here. Picture number 5, you can see inverted cage. Now, this has a number of causes that we see. Basically, the hydraulic cylinder rod has failed, it's separated, and the reason for that is the grease nipple wasn't receiving grease. The technician thought it was. Grease was going in there, but it's dried, and over a period of time, it's metal fatigue and it's failed. And also that compounded by, in the manual, the service manual and operator manual, the lubrication points at that time were not shown for the technician. So this was hidden away, this lubrication point, and quite difficult to find. And picture number 6 is an example of cracks forming in the structure of the Mewp. And our defence for these are post-hire inspections and pre-use inspections predominantly. Next slide, please. So here, now I'm going to focus on competence in two particular areas mainly. Now this is about Mewp operator competence, this particular slide here. So to be a Mewp operator, you must have the required levels of skill for knowledge, training, and experience. And this is what this is all about. This is one of the primary ways we can reduce and eliminate technical failures. So Mewp operators without the required competency levels will cause Mewp technical failures via damage, neglect, incorrect use, abuse, and also by doing no pre-use inspections, these will be caused. Mewps are the safest way of working at height. But as a Mewp operator, I not only operate the Mewp, I'm also responsible for inspecting it, checking for damage and malfunctions before use, for example. So please, when we think about competence in Mewp operators, we need to make sure that we're using structured training by accredited training instructors and recognised training bodies. And only qualified training instructors, please, provide competence to our Mewp operators. Next slide, please. So also I want to talk about the competence of the technician or the mechanic or the maintenance engineer for that matter. So what's the task of the technician with the Mewp? They do post-hire inspections, periodic maintenance, repairs, major repair work. They need diagnosis skills, and they have to follow and understand the OEM instructions because they're responsible for making sure that the Mewp is safe, reliable, and looking good when it goes to the end user, when it goes to the customer. So to inspect, maintain and repair and operate this Mewp, you must have the required competency levels. What is a competent person? A well-known description of a competent person definition is a competent person is defined as a person who is appointed or designated by the employer to perform specific duties based on knowledge, training and experience.
Okay, looks like we may have lost Rob there. He seems to have frozen. Rob is actually over in India at the moment, so I think his connection in his hotel is probably proving to be quite challenging. So thanks for Rob on that side of things. We may get him back and hopefully he can finish off his presentation, but we've lost him completely now. Okay, moving on. We're now going to look at this from the user's perspective. So I'm going to hand it over to Caroline. Caroline, yours. Over to you.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, can I have my slides, please? Thank you. Okay. Hi, first slide then. Right, so I work as head of QHSE for FK Group. We're mainly an enveloping solutions contractor. Within our company, the roofing and cladding side of the business is the biggest user of Mewps. Now, in 2022, we started to discover some new issues around the use of Mewps on our projects that hadn't really come to light the year before. So the main two areas really was on, from a high-risk perspective, we were struggling to actually being able to hire Mewps on the UK market. As a result, we ended up moving Mewps from one project to another, so we did not hire them like we would have traditionally done. The second issue that we started to notice when we were doing visits out on the projects was the amount of breakdowns that we were occurring with these Mewps. And so we therefore decided that it would be something that QHSE team would focus on, and we will be continuing to focus on this next year. The third issue that we had, and can I have my next slide, please, was for the first time, we had what we call in the UK a RIDDOR incident. We have a set of regulations which is around reporting of injuries, diseases and dangerous occurrence. I have to say in my career, this is the first one that I've actually reported under the dangerous occurrence element in regarding to a failure of a machine. Okay, so what happened was we had a scissor lift. It had been delivered to a site a couple of weeks before. The scissor lift, when we've looked into the history, was probably around 7 years old. And what occurred on the day was that the operator was extending the scissor lift up to do some roof works. He got to about 3 meters and he heard a loud bang. He was able to bring the scissor back down, so we didn't have to put our emergency controls in place. And on inspection, we found that one of the arms had failed. And therefore, as it's classed as a load-bearing part, it made it RIDDOR reportable. Now, from a high-risk perspective, it also made us have to look at some other issues. The first of all is that we are still awaiting the report from the hirer to actually tell us the full failures of the machine. We think it was through, if you look at what we looked at, that it was down to metal fatigue on the arm. However, we are still awaiting further information. Now, this occurrence happened back in July, so we've got quite a bit of a gap here. We were also made aware that this was the second incident with the same make and model of Mewp. That then made us have to look at some more legislation within the UK, which is provision and use of work equipment regulations. Because there is a regulation 4 which talks to us about the suitability of the equipment and plants that we put people on, it therefore made us have to assess that we needed to take that make and model out of our hire range. So currently that make and model is no longer in use on any of our projects until we're able to satisfy that this was a one-off occurrence. Okay, since I put these slides together, I've also been made aware of another Mewp incident, not on one of our projects, but with one of our other sort of companies that we work with, where they've had failures due to an outrigger. So again, we had a situation where we had to recall all our sites and that particular make and model and go back to the manufacturer's recommendations and ensure that those recommendations were put in place before we could put those Mewps back into operation on the projects. Next slide, please. So I thought I'd ask a few questions of my sites and projects, because I think sometimes as a health and safety professional, you have thoughts, but they're not always based on facts. So I just put a few little questions out to them as part, for this webinar today. And one of the things is, does the checks, do they become just a tick box exercise? Interestingly, the response was, no, we all do them properly, which I find quite interesting when I go and look and find that Mewps have been taken out of operation due to a failure or for some other reason. And again, when you look at the records that we keep, they don't then tell us that has been fixed and it's been put back into use. Are Mewps being misused? Again, no. I'll be honest, this is one of our projects that the slide's from. So, you know, reality may be a different thought some days. How often are breakdowns occurring? I know they're up from last year. This was a massive yes, there's been a huge increase. Again, I don't have precise figures, and that's something we will be looking at for next year. Are periodic inspections being carried out by the rental companies? This was pretty good. Most said yes, that they were and could prove that the paperwork was in place. Are operators trained? Well, we only have Ipaf operators, and that is one of our company rules. So again, it was a bit of a question out to them. And are operators having to violate rules or procedures to get the job done? So one of the things we were sort of wanting to look at is, you know, are people bypassing things, maybe overriding devices in order to get the job done? Again, they came back saying, no, this doesn't really happen. But again, it will be a focus for us next year. Is reality the same as what the site teams think it is? Next slide, please. And so, currently, we don't calculate as a KPI how much this lost time is costing us as a business. But what I have found, if you give me the next slide, please, one of my site managers is already doing this. So I think it'll be a great thing for us to introduce next year to actually look at what breakdowns are actually occurring. Is there any trends, i.e. make, model, manufacturer for us? As a hirer, how much that downtime is, because one of the issues that has been touched on earlier on is about the people that come out to fix the maintenance and actually come out and fix the faults. We've on some models struggled to get parts for once there's a breakdown, so again that has increased the time, and actually getting maintenance engineers out has also proved to be a bit of a trend for ourselves as a hirer. So from next year, you know, I'll be starting to look at this in more details because it has become a bigger risk to us as a user. Next slide, please. So, you know, there are some really good things that we find as a hirer. We have, you know, some great operators that are Ipaf trained. I think, again, you know, going with the Ipaf training gives us confidence of the standard that our people are trained to. We have on the whole good statutory inspections, and we have really good support from our hire companies. The other thing that we're having to learn, and it's a great thing because it starts stretching us, is actually about the new models that are coming to the market and their capabilities as a hirer. So again, that's been a good area for us, and I'm working with our plant hire manager on that because you know, there's some great new kit coming out. But what I found is our site teams like to use the make and model they've always used because they know it. Areas that I think that really are for improvement for us and maybe, you know, the industry is that we need to record our breakdowns better. We need to make sure that they're entered onto our plant registers. And we also need to ensure that, you know, we have the traceability of when things have been fixed. We need a better understanding of, you know, the maintenance of the Mewps that we hire in. It's not particularly an area we've looked at in the past. We've tended to rely on our hire companies, but I do believe as a hirer now, it's an area that we need to look more into. I think it's great that there's more availability of kit coming to the market now, particularly the new kit. And I do think, though, we do need to address the shortage of maintenance operatives and engineers that are out there, because that is, as a hirer, causing us some major downtime. Thank you. That ends the slides.
Thank you, Caroline, and great honest insight there from the from yourself as and FK Group. So interesting if we can support you on any of them aspects as well. I think that's great. Right, great news. We have got Rob back. So Rob, if we're okay, we're going to finish your slides and then we'll then move on to the final session.
Thank you.
Can you hear
So,
now, mate?
thank you. Let's go to the next slide, please. Excuse me. So I've discussed some of the aspects of what we require from operators' competence and also from the maintenance technicians' competency levels required. What do we need from a manufacturer, from a rental company perspective? So I'm just going to read some of these from the left-hand side. We need operator maintenance parts manuals in the language that are relevant to the country the Mewp's being used in. Very important. And we need the same from safety instructional decals on the Mewp. It needs to be in the correct language for where the country that Mewp's being used in. We also need standardization of Mewp controls across manufacturers, including emergency lowering systems. We need more in-country technical training availability. It's been a challenge for some time now. And we don't want to pay for technical training, funnily enough. And we want the manufacturers to always consider maintenance technicians and ease of maintenance in Mewp design. By the way, I'm not saying that none of these things are happening. We're just saying that we want more and more of this. And we want Mewps that meet a recognized standard. And we want manufacturers to always have accreditation, ISO accreditation in quality, in safety, in sustainability, for example. And we want online technical training availability, on-time parts supply. We want improvement in hydraulic hose layout in the Mewp. One of the biggest issues we have, technical failures are hydraulic hose or hydraulic related leaks. And we want speedy response to solutions, technical solutions from the OEMs. And this might mean partnering up with third-party suppliers where they're reputable. Next slide, please, Brian. So this last slide looks at some of the solutions from a rental company. What do we do to improve technical failures, breakdowns, and mechanical failures? So here's what we do as a rental organisation. We have a fleet renewal program. We have product knowledge training for our commercial teams and our customers to improve product knowledge to make sure we're giving the right machine for the job. We follow Ipaf systems and process best practices for all things related to mobile elevator platforms. We have open house days and safety days for our customers for knowledge learning. We have continuous internal and external audits and improvement reviews. We're measuring ourselves continually.
Okay, I think technology's got the better of us with losing Rob there. I think hopefully we're getting the gist of what they do, but certainly from what you can see from what Manlift do, they do a huge amount of data collection and looking at their systems and processes, and certainly some interesting aspects there. Okay, so so thank you very much to both Rob at the end there, but now we're going to watch a short film from a sponsor today, GemOne. Okay, thank you very much to GemOne. So now we're going to move on to the panel session. I'm glad to say we've got Rob back, but Rob, we're going to move on to the panel session now, just conscious of time at this moment in time. Okay, now recently Ipaf released a statement on using the emergency stop to isolate the controls. I'm going to pose this question to Jim, really. Could you confirm what we as a collective have been doing recently to look into this and what the certainly the short, medium and long-term aspects are?
Sure, Brian. Yeah, I can. So as Ipaf, we got together on the back of an alert that went out that discussed the impact of using emergency stop buttons as a method of isolating controls. And Ipaf provided a statement out on that shortly after receiving that alert. Since then, what we've done is we've got together as a collective through Ipaf to understand our members' position, and that's been with the Manufacturers Technical Committee that I represent, but also the International Safety Committee and the Training Committee. We've got together to try and understand the potential consequence of that safety alert. For the immediate term, we've issued the Ipaf safety statement, and we've provided an update to that statement as well. Just clarifying the importance of familiarisation of the machine that you're operating, which I think has been a recurring theme through today's panel presentations. But what we've also done is we've asked all manufacturers, not just the members of the MTC, a series of questions to try and understand a bit more about the consequence of the early statement and what its far-reaching implications could be. We've received a good number of responses to that survey, but we are now in the process of assessing them and understanding their impact on the safety alert. So those responses are in. There are some detailed comments in there that we need to understand and assess as a community, and we're currently in the process of doing that, with the objective of being able to provide further update from Ipaf before Christmas. So it was good to get an update from manufacturers inside and outside of the MTC. But if there are any manufacturers listening today that didn't get the opportunity to provide feedback into that survey, I'd urge you to reach out to either myself or Brian if you are keen to provide further input. I'm always keen to get that information. So at the moment, we're assessing the information received, and we'll provide a further update in the coming days.
Thank you, Jim. Great, and thank you for that. And I know, a lot of people are doing a lot of work in trying to get some sort of, information out to people at the moment on this. We've had a couple of questions come in. I think the first question is I'm going to use this from TJ Lyons, and TJ's asked, and I think I'm going to aim this one at you, Caroline, based on one of your pictures that was on there. I think this is aimed at, but how do you ensure that sites use the correctly sized lift, not the least expensive? I suspect that's probably aimed at the person stood on the guardrails.
Yeah.
For what you put on the slide sometimes.
Yeah, well, no. I think it's sometimes good to be honest and see what the reality is, because ultimately, when we're looking at a project, we're looking at the height, reach, whatever products we're putting on the building. And part of our pre-planning works is that, in theory, we should have the right piece of equipment, the right Mewp, for the task that we're carrying out. In the case of that picture, it really was that, I'll be honest, he borrowed it from someone else. And that does happen in reality. So it is, we calculate, we try and isolate. Occasionally, someone will go and borrow.
Thank you, Caroline. And I think, again, really appreciate your honesty. And I think, the only thing I would probably say, there is a site assessment for Mewp's course, and that's something that perhaps some of your teams may really benefit from, and that helps them to select the right type of equipment for the task that they are intended to. I've got a question here from Christian Maruru. I often come across Mewp check sheets carried out as tick exercises. So that you alluded to that, Caroline. It's really easy to observe these. For example, in Ireland, a general assessment form is required to fill out for a Mewp on a construction site, even if this is form for lifting equipment. However, I see these being ticked. I think you're absolutely right. One thing that I will really sort of confirm here today is that on the ePAL app, so the digital PAL card, we are looking to introduce a pre-use check capability within the ePAL app, based on the equipment that's being used. So I think hopefully that will really help and help use, and help contractors confirm that equipment have been, pre-use checked and checked prior to use. Rob, I'm going to ask you a question. You discussed on there, you showed crack welds on some of your Mewp photos, and I think this is sometimes where we have to be really careful. But what is your view on repairing these crack welds on a Mewp? Hopefully you can hear me, mate.
Yeah, so again, my fast answer is competence, right? We need to make sure that we're only repairing our
I think we've lost him again. It's yeah.
We've lost him. I think I'd probably echo where Robert's headed with that, which is about making sure that the competence of the individual doing the task is the right competence to perform the task, from the simplest task to the more complex, such as re-welding. And I think any uncertainty, like on a structural component, should be going to the manufacturer's service manual to understand, what am I allowed to do? What should I be doing? And if it's not clear, you need to reach out to the manufacturer if it's something that is not a normal task. So, welding a structural member, I think, is something that even a competent welder would want to get some confirmation from the manufacturer that they're not going to undermine any safety case when they do it.
Agreed. Absolutely. Yeah. Jim, just on clearly we saw some of the issues that Mike raised at the start of the webinar there. And I know you kind of pointed to it on your presentation, but how often do standards get updated to reflect the learnings from potentially mechanical and technical issues? What's your view on that, please?
That's a great question, Brian. The pace of standards change isn't a fast one, but it's a very considered one. So there is typically a 5-year review cycle on standards that means work is happening long before the 5 years is up to review and assess the validity for standard. And you may find some standards with some date ranges that look quite old. The reality is they've been assessed by a technical committee and determined as still applicable, and there's been no change. But feeding state of the art and feeding kind of in-service and true experience and real understanding of hazardous situations do get wrapped into standards development and standards updates. And having been exposed to the process now for a number of years, there's an awful lot of discussion going into some very, very targeted issues or targeted ambiguity into standards. Standards are a great place to start, but they can always be cleaner, they can always be clearer, they could always be less ambiguous. And a lot of the work going into these committees is to take that state of the art and say, how does it fit in the standards? The biggest challenge that we have when we do development standards through that iteration cycle is ensuring that we maintain the ability to be innovative. So a standard shouldn't be constraining to design, it should be cognizant of the risks that it's trying to design out. And that's a very subtle difference. So standardization of emergency lowering was mentioned by Rob as something that they want, which is a good idea. It sounds sensible, but what you don't want to do, which one's the right one, which is the best one, which is the one in the marketplace today that we should all adopt as manufacturers. And that's where the debate comes in, because it's down to interpretation of the risk whilst creating innovation. And we don't want to stymie development, and there may be a future design that is so much better than everything on the marketplace today that we couldn't introduce because we've stymied the design through standards. So there is an awful lot of work at a very detailed level at ad hoc working groups to try to understand not just manufacturers, users, authorities, and experts in the field, consultants, to say, how do we best standardize the industry, how do we best standardize design whilst maintaining the ability to be innovative and create design difference. And controls being standardized is a great example where a standard has been developed to standardize some of the control philosophies whilst trying to maintain that ability to be innovative. So it does happen, but it isn't a fast process, but it is a very, very well considered process.
Okay, thank you for that, Jim. I'm conscious of time. We are nearly out of time. We have got more questions, so what we'll attempt to do is to answer these personally, because time is against us. But so I think for that, we are, we're going to go through the last thing. I think, first of all, really big thanks. I think this has been a really useful and thought-provoking webinar today, and it certainly, gives some food for thought for some of the people. But real big thank you to our sponsors today, which are Hinowa and GemOne for sponsoring the webinar, and of course, our thanks to the panel of speakers, Caroline, Jim, Rob and Mike. Rob, thank you for coming back in again. I know you had some challenges there, but and really sort of lastly, thank you to all of you today for taking that time to come and listen to the webinar. It really does make it worthwhile when you do attend. So please, do remember to sort of complete the final poll. We'll mention that in 2023 there will be more webinars being provided, and details of these will be listed on the Ipaf website in the not too distant future. And I do hope to see some of you at the Ipaf Summit, the International Award for Powered Access, which will be held in Berlin on the 19th and 20th of April. Bookings and award nominations are still open. It's a great event to network and to meet people and collar us and give us a bit of grief. But and again, details can be found on the ipaf.org/events part of the website. So we've come to the end now. I would like to wish you all the very best for holidays and Christmas around the world, and stay safe, and thank you.